Hey, before we start the interview, we'd just like to say thank you so much to Konami Digital Entertainment for sponsoring this video. All right, Joel and Shane from Yakuza, thank you so much for joining us here for this interview. If you could just introduce yourselves and tell me what led to you founding Yakuza and your role with the company, really what led to Skelattack.
I'm Shane deLumeau. I'm the CEO of Ukuza. I'm also the producer and co-director on Skelattack with Joel.
I'm Joel. I'm the CTO at Ukuza and co-director and then lead developer.
So tell me a little bit about Skelattack. How would you describe it? Because it seems like kind of a mashup of a few different genres, and I'm really interested in what kind of inspired it and what led to it.
So Skelattack is a reverse dungeon crawler. What you could think of with that is normally you always play as the adventurer, you're running into the dungeons, you're slashing down the monsters. But we're saying, okay, what if you talk to the dungeon dwellers? What do they think about all of this? And really it comes back to, us flipping the dungeon crawler on its head where you're in the place of that little skeleton NPC that you're used to slashing down. We really took a beat from, different places like Tim Burton and Nightmare Before Christmas and said, what if we made these monsters really lovable characters that you relate to, and really it's about defending your dungeon home. So
skeletons really do get roughed up a lot in these games.
And I mean, it's essentially all your neighbors. Everyone's skeletons, or there's goblins or demon librarians and different people like that. So we make them really cute and quirky so that you relate as a player as you're going through.
I was going to ask you, I'm glad you mentioned that because I was definitely getting a Tim Burton vibe from the game. Were those movies an influence? Could you mention any others?
Yeah. So when the original concept for Skelattack came up, it was through our art director, Dave. And he was going through different freelance work, and he came up with this concept to actually learn game design and game development, and drew this little concept of this quirky little skeleton character. So it really just kind of bloomed from there into all of these different characters and building out this world. And really when we started to build it out more, it was, okay, Tim Burton, Nightmare Before Christmas style. But then we started pulling influences from other games like Super Meat Boy or Legend of Zelda. And we started seeing all of the hard platforming and hazards and all the fun stuff that could kill you in multiple ways. So
Maybe a little too hard of platforming and hazards. I remember when I first joined the team, I was starting to build levels, and taking after Super Meat Boy, I was like, everything can kill you. If you touch anything that isn't in the ground or a wall, then you die. And Shane would play through the levels and be like, dude, this is impossible. Like,
this is too hard though.
You can't get through this. And then, we had to start adjusting and changing up enemies and stuff.
Yeah, it was kind of a one-shot kill kind of thing. That was the vibe I was getting. Also from Spelunky a little bit too.
Right.
Yeah, we were also really inspired by Hollow Knight. The visuals of Hollow Knight were like especially beautiful to us, and a lot of our art direction. We wanted to reach that kind of quality, I think, with the environments feeling they pull you in, they capture you and make you feel like you're there.
Right.
And they also kind of, I definitely felt like with Hollow Knights, the environments told you a story without words a little bit. Right. Like you were it was communicating a lot, but non-verbally, which I really liked. And I get that vibe off your game as well. Tell me a little bit about development. How long did it take? How big was your team? Just a little bit. I know that's it's always a tough process, but how did that go for you guys?
So Yakuza started about 3.5 years ago as an indie publisher. Skelattack was one of the first titles that we signed on, which was really just Dave and his original game idea that he was starting to build out on his own. After taking the game to PAX and getting a big response, we said, hey, how can we build this out much further? Yeah. So we all agreed, we loved working with each other. We brought the game in-house and really started fleshing it out a whole lot more. So over the course of maybe the next 6 to 8 months, we put in a lot more to it, but it still wasn't as beefy as we wanted it. So that's where we said, okay, let's expand the team. Let's start to build a much richer backstory to it. And then I think over the last 10 months is where we really hammered away on it and reworked pretty much every facet of the game. So all of the art assets to the dialogue to the full backstory, and we just blew it out of the water at that point. And Joel, I don't know if you want to talk to some of that as well.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is that Dave worked on the game by himself for maybe, was it 4 years? It's like 3 or 4 years.
Jeez.
That he was developing, and he was an artist and teaching himself how to program, was basically doing everything. And he linked up with Yakuza at PAX, and then the team grew to, I think we had 12 people.
13.
Was it 13?
Yeah.
Yeah, when we were at our max. And for Dave, that was massive. Like, he's for years and years.
From 1 to 13. Yeah.
Right. And then all of a sudden, all of these people are now working on his baby. And it's an interesting process. A lot of growth and change with the team.
Yeah. What were some of the highs from the development process, and how did you manage that transition from one person thing to scaling it up like that?
I mean, for me, really the highs were when we how everything kind of took off and really started to run was we just finished doing a round of updates for the game, and we said, how can we get some visibility for this? We created a trailer for the game in the style of the 1990 Super Mario World commercial. So all of the really hokey dialogue and everything, and had the old VHS look to it, and that mixed with the hand-drawn animations and stuff did really well. So we got picked up by PC Gamer. A lot of people started to notice it. That went over really well at PAX. And that's where, we linked up with Konami on everything and really started to build out that relationship. So that was one of the big pieces for me. But then also reworking all of the levels and all of the assets and being wow, this is a world's difference from where we originally started.
Yeah, like a polishing process or something like that.
That trailer that he's talking about was actually the very first thing that I ever saw when it comes to Skelattack. I was just on Twitter one day before I joined the team, stumbled upon that trailer in that retro style, and I was with a friend of mine at the time, and we were just freaking out. This looks amazing. I want to play this. This is awesome. Then we were going to PAX that year, and we met Ukuza there, and we were like, wait a minute, that booth a few feet away from us is the producer of this trailer in this game. And then that's how I ended up meeting them. So yeah, that trailer, that high that you're talking about is that's what drew me in the first time.
You had described it as a kind of a reverse dungeon crawler. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on that.
For all of the adventure games out there, you're running through the dungeon, you're slashing all the baddies down. So really, we put you in the shoes of the original enemy, and we're saying, hey, you have to actually stop everyone from coming in, get rid of all those humans. So really it's making your way up from this little enclave, this village Aftervale in the very bottom of the dungeon, all the way up to the top of the dungeon. Nice. To save your dungeon denizens and go out there and retrieve the magic and the elder that was stolen from the dungeon. So we flip the script and want players to experience kind of what it's like from that dungeon dweller's mindset.
Is it a roguelike? Is it randomly generated? How does that work?
It's not randomly generated. It doesn't have procedural elements. So we just we wanted static pieces. We wanted to tell a linear story with it and have people experience it. So it's more of a Metroidvania when you go back through it, pulling elements from Metroid, but also the weapon upgrades and slashing around for Castlevania and stuff. So we had a lot of that going back and forth in the development. People asking, what is this? It's kind of like an action adventure, but it's Metroidvania. So it's a pretty good mix, but it's static, and we wanted to focus more on the storytelling and specific environments.
It does seem like a challenge for a 2D platformer. How do you pull off storytelling in an environment like that?
One is through, like you mentioned earlier, the environment. Really kind of having the environment tell part of it. What's the magic in this area? How live here? How do these monsters relate to each other? And playing through the game, you'll go to the Goblin's Goblet, which is everyone after work goes there, has a pint, and they're
that's awesome.
And then we do small things like that, but the writing was really, really important.
Yeah.
And Doug Borghese and Trip Durden are two writers on it. Did a fantastic job of really writing this quirky dialogue you'd find in Monty Python and the Holy Grail or other crazy over the top movies like that.
Got it. You're going for the Monty Python crowd here with that, or it almost reminds me of a Terry Pratchett like guards kind of thing,
right?
Sort of flipping the script.
Yeah, so it's really like overblown, and
yeah,
I mean you have to do that when your enemies are all humans,
right?
And they're invaders. Like it's not that interesting, so you really have to push that character development over the top, and then you're like, oh, these are hilarious.
And you're a video game. You've got to go big to begin with. So
yeah.
that makes sense. Question for both of you. What are your favorite parts about the game?
I mean, my favorite thing has got to be the platforming. I mean, there's a lot of story and a lot of characters, and the game has a nice intro where you're meeting people, and it's at first you're like, maybe this game is not going to be that hard. There are some platforming sequences that you're timing your jumps to make it through two obstacles, and it's a matter of a few pixels that you can make the jump. I'm a huge Dark Souls fan, and I'm playing Sekiro right now. It's a grind. It's incredibly challenging. There's moments like that in Skelattack that I love.
Yeah, and I think there's been a market for hard platformers too. Like you mentioned Super Meat Boy, Celeste. I think did really well. Kind of a similar thing. It gives me a little bit of that vibe, kind of.
On my end, it was really more about the storytelling. So one of my favorite pieces was when Joel and I were working with Dave and saying, hey, what are all of the emotions that each of the main characters need to convey? And then we had to, hand draw all of these animations for each of these characters. And then we set up those cutscenes and really try to convey that emotion for what these characters are saying in this hand-drawn animation style. So I think that really came through a lot and added a ton to the story. But I think also when Joel and I were going through and building out levels on this with our team, it was like, how do these two things play together? So these really interesting cinematics with these really deep, rich environments.
Do you guys have hopes? I mean, goals for the games? It seems like you got hooked up with the original creator, so you must have seen some, promise in there.
So Dave and I connected on Twitter through the Ukuza Twitter account. He was looking for a publisher at that point. So he was reaching out to all the other indie publishers, and really they had no room to, slot in another title, or it just wasn't a fit for their particular style. So we connected, and Dave reached out and he's like, hey, I have this idea. I really want to make it into a game, much bigger than what I have now. What are your guys' thoughts? And I wrote back, we've actually been keeping an eye on your title for a little while now, and we're really interested in it. So what initially drew me into it was seeing some of the animations. So like when Skully is running, like there's a really smooth run animation that Dave drew in there. And then seeing things like the demon librarian where he's sitting at the desk in the library, kind of just flipping through pages. I was like, wow, these are really cool characters that could be fleshed out a lot more. But then there's also the potential to go and like merchandise this. Where can this move into other IP, like a Saturday morning cartoon or something like that?
That's the CEO talking there. Yeah.
Yes.
And then you guys got hooked up with a massive publisher, Konami. I wonder if you could talk about how that came to be.
It was a little bit surreal. We got the coverage in PC Gamer.
Yeah.
There was an article written up, and it had that same trailer that hooked everyone else. And we actually were prepping to go to GDC and just do a little networking. I received the email and said, hey, this is, Mike from Konami, and really, there's a bunch of people here that are interested in your game. Would you guys want to meet up for GDC? And immediately I was like, all right, who's messing with me here?
Yeah.
I was like, Dave, Doug, are you guys sending me these emails and just pretending to be somebody else?
Which college buddy is messing with me?
Exactly. And then, just shot back and forth, and we met up at GDC, and it was myself and Doug and the team at Konami, and we just started running through the pitch deck that I had, showing a new trailer that we cut, and everyone started fanboying. So we were just thinking, what is the the potential in this? Oh man, the soundtrack is so good. It's so Danny Elfman with Nightmare Before Christmas. And everyone saw the potential in it. So we went through that process, and there was a lot of back and forth for months. But, you know, when we finally said, all right, we're moving forward, it was like, we couldn't be any more stoked. It was like a really awesome match. And then going through the whole development life cycle, it was great. So a lot of control was given on our end, but a lot of assistance and help was also put up front.
Yeah, I was gonna say it seems like a good, like a Halloween release, but it also kind of has that art style that seems timeless too. Like it could kind of go literally at any time.
Right. We originally had an October 31st release planned.
Yeah.
But we also wanted to go and rework a lot of it. So now with, you know, Konami being on board with it, we said we have to raise the bar on this. So
sure. Yeah.
It can't just be any game out there that's released to Steam. We have to add a lot more meat to this, right? So that's why we ended up pushing back, and we've really been heads down over the last 10 months or so with the development.
Is it just Steam or is it other platforms? Forgive my ignorance.
It's Steam, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, and Xbox.
Okay, yeah. It definitely has Switch and consoles written all over it. So that's good to hear.
For the development, Joel, I know, you know, one thing that you and I spoke about was, you know, just the creative freedom and how the partnership has worked with Konami. So do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, it was kind of like a dream come true when it comes to being an indie dev and then getting picked up by such a massive publisher. I think everybody's always afraid that, you know, the big guy's going to come in and sink their claws into your game and start changing stuff and give you a big list of things that you have to update and change. And it wasn't that at all. They loved the game as much as we did, and like basically everything that we got from them was like positive improvement. It was like, hey, you know, this is stuff that we're experiencing as we play it, and you know, this is what we think would help, you know, players or would make the experience better. That kind of sounds fairy tale-ish, but it really was like we had that much creative freedom, and everybody's mind was just like, how do we make the game better? So yeah, it was kind of the perfect setup for a team that wanted to put their heart into it, but yet still get published by somebody huge.
That's awesome, because yeah, you do hear you know, stories, but I've also heard lately that, you know, Nintendo and other companies have rolled out the red carpet for indies. So it's awesome to hear that Konami has done the same thing for you guys. Sounds like a real collaborative partner on this.
It's something that I don't think people are expecting. Mm-hmm. So for Konami to come out with this game in this style, it's completely different than what they have, but it also harks back to an earlier era of Konami.
Yes, yeah.
Where they're doing all those 2D games. So, you know, with Castlevania being one of those titles, a 2D title, similar to the style that we have, not art style, but more on gameplay style.
Yeah, no, I'm old enough to remember those games, but yeah, more of the sort of pixelated, and yeah, this is obviously a different art style, but the platforming and the gameplay does remind me of it a little bit. It does seem like a fit with Konami.
Yep. Yeah, just upgrading those weapons, going through, slashing down all the different bodies as you go. Yeah, it fits really well, especially with, you know, some of their older titles, like I don't know if you ever played the Legend of the Mystical Ninja.
Yes, I did. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So very quirky style back then, but one of the classic games. So really loved the core catalog that they had, and you know, would love to be part of that.
Awesome. Joel and Shane, thank you so much for talking to me, and I believe by the time you watch this video, Skelattack will be available now on Steam, PS4, Switch, Xbox One. Go check it out. It looks great, and give it a shot. Thank you guys again.
Cool.
Thanks for having us.